Come on in, welcome to Idled Out, where we talk all things Survivor. My name is Luke, and today we're revisiting my initial Survivor 41 cast analysis to see just how accurate, or more likely inaccurate, my initial reads of the cast were. Going off of just a CBS biography and a handful of pre-game interviews, I assigned each of the 18 Survivor 41 players an award, like most likely to win or most likely to be the first one out. I'm gonna be honest, I don't always want my initial cast assessments to be correct. Survivor's way more fun when people defy your expectations rather than when they blandly meet them. And Survivor bios and pregame press aren't exactly fully reliable when it comes to learning about someone's personality anyway. I'll remind you all that Mick's official CBS biography begins by calling him smart, funny, and charming. I hope the point has been made. Anyway, let's go through the cast boot by boot, check out what I initially said about them, and see how right or wrong I was. I'll be giving a full point to myself for reads that were right on the money, half points for reads that were almost there, and no points for reads that were way off. And I'm gonna be generous with the half points, okay? And take into account not only the award I assign the player, but my larger analysis of them as well. Obviously, I'll be fully spoiling the boot order of Survivor 41 here. This is your final warning to turn back time. All that said, let's take a look back at my initial cast analysis and see how right and wrong I was. Kicking things off, we have Abraham, the winner of the Tom Laidlaw Award for most likely to be way too loyal. In my initial cast assessment, I accurately read Abraham as a man with an old school mentality to the game, a guy who just wants to win challenges and who is either going to go out pre-merge or make the final 6. There's no other place these dudes finish. I compared him to Tom Laidlaw, Joe Del Campo, Rick Nelson, Jerry Sims, and on back until the beginning of time. Totally normal, kind, alliance-oriented men over 40 who were just along for the ride and happy to be there. Here's what I originally said. Eric seems like a nice guy, but I think for a cast that's been waiting a year and a half to play this game, chomping at the bit to get in there and make big moves, Eric's "let's just win challenges guys" energy is gonna get him a solid 3rd or 4th boot finish. Well, can't say I was wrong there, other than I called him Eric instead of Abraham. His entire story was about wanting to win challenges, the rest of his tribe didn't want to play that style of game, and he was voted out first. Not much else to say about Abraham. I'm tempted to give myself 2 points for this one because of how on point I was, and because I have a feeling I'll be needing the assist later, but let's be fair. I had this one right, 1 point. Next we have Sarah, the winner of the Purple Kelly Award for most likely to be completely invisible. Other than Abraham, Sarah was the only other player who said pre-merge they want to play a normal, low-key game. I did not predict that Sarah's normal, low-key game would get her out second. I instead predicted that her normal, low-key game would take her to the mid-merge as our token invisible purple meme, which ultimately ended up being Heather. Here's what I originally said. Someone get this girl a purple swimsuit. Sarah wants to play an under-the-radar game. Whoa, shocker. But right away, I'm afraid she'll go so under the radar that she'll end up with like 8 confessionals across 12 episodes or something. Well, you can't tell me I wasn't close. In a world where JD or Brad is voted out second instead of her, and Ua isn't a complete train wreck, Sarah goes deep into the game and she's totally that person. Even in her single episode appearance in Survivor 41, she's probably the least visible member on Ua, ahead of Genie. I'm tempted to award half a point because I know in my heart of hearts that she would have been purpled hard if she went far. But in a world where Heather exists, I can't in good conscience give myself any points here. Our next player is Voce, the recipient of the coveted Drew Christie Award for most likely to completely flame out early. When we're talking about missed character opportunities, there is no bigger what if for me in recent Survivor years than Voce. I needed this guy to play the game he said he was going to, which was an overly aggressive Russell Hantz style of game that almost certainly would have seen him going out in a pre-merge blaze of glory. In a post-Kagayan world, it's hard for me to imagine smart players letting someone playing this hard, this fast, anywhere near the end, but stranger things have happened, I guess. However, I think David's going to be a gloriously overplaying pre-merge train wreck a la Garrett or Drew, and I've got my ticket stamped and I'm ready to board. Instead of the pre-merge train wreck we all deserve, Voce just ended up on the wrong side of the numbers immediately and was quietly booted. I think everyone was looking forward to this guy's delusional, messy gameplay. And while I fully expected him to be the third boot, not like this. As for me, I was sort of right. He was pre-merge, but he wasn't the Zeppelin crash I expected, so I'm giving myself half a point. Up next is Brad, who I gave the Tai Trang Award for most likely to be inhumanly wholesome. Well, Brad was not the most wholesome player of Survivor 41, that is Nasir. But he is second most wholesome. Whether he was building spy shacks, telling people to their faces he was voting them out, being an unexpected advantage-finding god, or adorably fumbling the line about broccoli being small trees, Brad's energy during his brief time on Survivor was pure chaotic good. I unfortunately overestimated how much stock his tribe would put in his work ethic. I really did not expect that a guy who was basically single-handedly building the shelter would ended up being voted out second from his tribe. In fact, I expected a very deep run from Brad, courtesy of said work ethic and that $1 million smile. Brad comes off as really real. He's got a great personality, and I think we're in for a deep run from Brad. He might not get a ton of screen time against some of the more bombastic personalities, but he'll be a kind, calming presence throughout the season. Alright, I'm trying to be fair here. Is half a point warranted? He wasn't inhumanly wholesome like Nasir, but he was pretty wholesome, and I think a lot of people really wanted to see a deeper run from him. You know what? Half a point. Brad would want that. Alright, it's UA from here on out, and up next is JD, who got the J Starret Award for most likely to have no clue what's going on. I initially called JD very naive and unprepared for this game. And, yeah. A lot of his interviews are about his academic accomplishments, or being a state track champion, or his ability to be popular in high school. I mean, those are all cool things, but they're very much things that only matter when you're 20 years old. I sense a lot of the naivete of youth in JD, and I'm just not really seeing him ever getting his footing in the game. While JD didn't have as much trouble connecting with the older players on his tribe as I originally thought, he was far too naive and put way too much trust in Shan. I called him Woo too, and I think that's pretty accurate. There's even an analog in Tony with Shan. From the upbeat positivity to the naive, far too trusting nature to the great hair, JD and Woo have a lot in common. My read on JD was one of my best, and I accurately predicted he'd be a completely out of his element pre-merger. Money. Our final pre-merge player is Genie, who I gave the Elaine Stott Award for most likely to go shockingly far. Oops. I don't know, this might be a bold take, but I just don't think she's in for an early exit at all, unless she completely botches a challenge or just comes out of the gate way too strong. Plus, you gotta admire a 46-year-old woman who says her greatest accomplishment in life is winning the Hustle Award at basketball camp when she was 15. Queen of peaking in high school. I guess I forgot the being on an Oolong tier tribe when recalling reasons someone might get voted out early. Everyone on UA clearly liked Genie. She wasn't on anyone's radar to take out until they simply had no other options left. And I do think if Genie did make the merge, she was in for a pretty deep run. But she didn't, so I get no points. Entering the merge, sort of. We have Sydney, who I gave the Abby Maria Award for most likely to cause chaos. Here's what I originally said. If you don't take out this chaotic player at their first tribal council, they catch the Hot Mess Express straight to the end game. And if Hurricane Sydney actually plays the type of game she says she's going to, chaotic, loyalty-free, clothing optional, she's going straight to Final 5 easily, leaving a path of destruction and bitter jurors in her wake. Well, I guess Sydney did get taken out at her first tribal council, but she wasn't the Abby or Nora style agent of chaos I expected. She spent the entire pre-merge safe on Luvu, in a strong alliance with Danny and Deshawn, then got twist screwed out of the game, making her my other big what could have been player of this season. Sydney ultimately ended up being more Tyson than Abby, and that means no points for me. Up next is Tiffany, who I gave the Ream Daily Award for most likely to have mega mom energy. Hard to argue with this one. From her already iconic season opening quote to using her teaching and parenting skills to make bonds on Yasa, Tiffany had mom energy and was proud of it. And just like Ream, Tiffany was even targeted as the first boot. Can I say called it? I called it. At age 32, she became one of the youngest people to preemptively have her ovaries removed, essentially pre-viving cancer, and she's a teacher on a tribe with two of the youngest people on the season, which actually might benefit her if she can manifest that teacher/mom energy into a connection instead of an irritation. Tiffany was so fun to watch this season, and it was a personal disappointment for me when she exited the game relatively early. What's not disappointing is how accurate my initial read on Tiffany was. Full point. Our next player is Nasir, who I gave the Wendy Joe Award for most likely to be first boot. If Luvu went to Tribal Council first, I think there's about a 99% chance I would have had this one right, but I've never been so happy to be wrong. Here's how I initially thought Nasir would do. But I really think Nasir is going to be in trouble early. In interviews, he comes off as a bit too eager, and I think in a small tribe of 6, that might rub some people the wrong way really early on. Plus, comparing yourself to Philip Shepard isn't exactly screaming tribal harmony to me. I think if this tribe can avoid tribal for a few rounds, he could get into a pretty good spot, given his actual outdoor skills. I want to see Nasir around for a long time, but my Wendy Joe senses are tingling. You know, it kind of feels like I was right on here. Nasir was in trouble early, but his outdoor skills and unexpected challenge strength kept him in the game and got the target off his back after a few rounds, leading to a much deeper run than I anticipated. However, I did call this guy as the first boot, and he was the 9th boot. 0 points. Next is Evie, who I crowned the winner of the Michaela Bradshaw Award for most likely to have a bunch of gifs made of them. Can't say I saw a lot of gifs of anyone this season, but Evie does have such an expressive face that someone probably should get on that. Here's how I initially assessed them. I'm not sure I really see a lengthy stay in the game for Evie, but I do see the Survivor tag in Giphy being flooded with gifs of her in about 3 weeks from right now. Evie's got a very low tolerance for BS. I mean, her answer to what is your biggest pet peeve is just men. Well, that is fair. Evie was definitely not the snarky, antagonistic player I expected them to be. Evie definitely played a much less volatile game than I thought they would. And considering that I expected a pre-merge exit for Evie, the cold streak continues. I gave the Sandra Diaz Twine Award for most likely to win it all to Shan. You know, I'm gonna take a victory lap here. Preseason, I saw basically no Shan hype, except from me. From her history, to her job, to her clear personal magnetism in interviews, it all screamed winner to me. Unfortunately, it also screamed winner to Erika and Ricard, who voted her out here. And while Shan didn't win, she was undoubtedly the biggest character of the season and the fan favorite to win for most of the game. Here's how I initially read her. I really get the impression she's going to easily connect with people. I mean, that is like half of a pastor's job, but also be able to read them well enough to know when she's being played. She's also already talking about jury management pre-game, which is a crucially underrated superpower in Survivor. Chantel gives me mad winner vibes, but not really obvious winner vibes like Ricard. And I think that will play into her hand perfectly in the game. You know what? I'm giving myself half a point for this one, just because very few people were on the Shan hype train, and it's inarguable that she was the favorite to win for most of the game. And I need the points. Next up is Lyanna, the winner of the Sierra Dawn Thomas Award for most likely to be a future WTF returnee. Well, this one's kind of hard to judge. I clearly did not think this through all the way. Here's what I originally said. However, I worry that she might not stick out enough in this cast to make a big impression either on the other players or the audience at home. Anyway, I expect Lyanna will go far, probably not be a huge fan favorite or terribly memorable, but someone production sees a lot of future potential in, and who shockingly shows up again on Game Changers 2, alongside, I don't know, Kellen and Gavin or something. Considering that Lyanna's entire game was trying to eliminate Xander, failing to do so, then getting eliminated by him, I'd say my read on her game was pretty accurate. I also think Lyanna's odds of returning are pretty good, and she would be a pretty WTF pick, although not quite as random as Sierra. I'm hesitantly giving myself a full point here, both because I think my read of her gameplay was pretty on point, and because I think the odds of her being a random second chancer down the line are pretty good. Although in a world where Sierra, Haley, and Caleb are game changers, anything's possible. Our final pre-finale player is the winner of the Keith Tollefson Award for most likely to quietly be the merge boot, Danny. You know, Danny was a huge surprise for me in the best way possible. Here's what I said pre-season. To his credit though, Danny does however know he's a threatening target, and hopes to redefine what that means on the show. So he wants to pin the target on the puzzle doers and social butterflies, who usually end up winning Survivor. If he's successful at deflecting the target and turning his threat level down, he might just be able to pull it off. But I don't know, can you really turn this off? Turns out yes. Yes, you can. Danny really did redefine how athletes and massive physical threats can play this game. Even though he should have been, he was basically never in the crosshairs until he took down Shan a round or two too early. And I think it's being underreported how big of an accomplishment that is for a guy who is built like him. I did successfully read that Danny would be a total sweetheart, and I was pleasantly surprised to see him go so far into the merge by playing a solid, old-school style game. And for all that, I get 0 points. Next, we have our first boot from the finale, Ricard, the recipient of the Kim Spradlin Award for most likely to look like a great Survivor player. Ricard was probably the most hyped player preseason, and I was certainly no exception to that hype. I thought preseason that, much like Kim, Ricard's whole essence just beams good at Survivor, and I was right. I mean, heading into the finale, Ricard was definitely the man to beat, courtesy of his big resume. Here's how I initially read him. So obviously I'm gonna stan Ricard because he's a fellow Washingtonian, but I mean, this guy seems almost engineered in a lab to be good at Survivor. We should rename him to Him Spradlin or something. He's charming, athletic, level-headed, authentic. Something will have to go horribly, horribly wrong for Ricard to not at least make the merge. Crazily enough, things did go horribly wrong for Ricard and Ua, and he still navigated that train wreck of a tribe and got out unscathed. Ricard fulfilled my expectations as a Him Spradlin who comes up just short, so I'm giving myself a full papaya. Moving on, we have our final 4 fire-making loser, Heather, who I listed as the winner of the Culpepper Award for most likely to get 1 to 3 votes at Final Tribal Council. Even still, Heather has Final Tribal Loser written all over her. From Lisa to Julie to Dawn to Missy, the quote-unquote mom of the season is often written off at Tribal Council and doesn't get the game credit they deserve. Okay, not so much Missy, but I stand by the rest. Heather's on a pretty stacked tribe physically and seems likable enough to get to the merge, but I'm getting pretty strong second place Final 3 loser vibes. Well, I was kind of close on this one. Heather didn't make Final Tribal Council, but I do think it's possible she does get 1 to 3 votes if she did, and I did at least have Heather pegged as an endgamer. Heather was indeed on a stacked tribe, and I guess we'll never know who would have been first out on Luvu if they went to Tribal, but I don't think it would have been her. But still, Heather definitely did not make Final Tribal Council and did not get 1 to 3 votes to win. My points on this are as invisible as Heather's edit. Next, we have 0-vote finalist Xander, who I gave the Coach Award for most likely to be completely delusional. Xander was the biggest surprise for me this season. Preseason, he came across as this season's Philip Shepard or Debbie Wanner. Go read his preseason bio. He's so faux worldly, it's weird. Here's a quote. I could spend hours discussing the golden warmth of the sun as it crests the horizon on a cold morning in Rocky Mountain National Park. I want to live 1,000 lives before mine is over. Dude took one community college philosophy class and came away thinking he's Henry David Thoreau. Here's what I originally said about Xander. What's up with this guy? He seems to switch from fratty bro to first-year philosophy student with each answer. Regardless, I cannot wait to hear the pseudo-intellectual babble that's gonna come out of this guy's mouth, though I doubt we'll hear it for long. While I pine for the days when we get our next coach, Philip, Tarzan, Vince, or Debbie, I'm glad it turned out not to be Xander. Instead of a delusional weirdo early boot, Xander ended up being super authentic, wholesome, and fun to watch. My read on Xander was really off, which means I get as many points as he did final tribal votes. Next is our 1-vote finalist, Deshawn, winner of the War Dog Award for Most Forced Nickname. Preseason, Deshawn was really pumping up this whole Devious D-Rad thing, and where was Devious D-Rad? I know he's got a lot of pregame fans, and for good reason. My man maxed out his charisma stats for sure. Deshawn really wants to play an upfront game to people's faces and then drag them in confessionals, otherwise known as playing to the cameras. And to go along with that, he's even got his own moniker ready, Devious D-Rad. I mean, it's alright, but it's a bit Walmart brand Devilish Davy, you know? I guess Devious D-Rad came out a little bit when he tried to throw a challenge pre-merge to vote off Erika, but he couldn't even get that done. I know that things beyond Survivor hindered Deshawn's ability to play the game he wanted to, but even when he was trying to be devious, like throwing Erika under the bus at Final 6, it just came across as, I don't know, another D word. Because this nickname was forced, but because we didn't see much of the devious side of Devious D-Rad, I'm gonna give myself half a point. On to our winner, Erika, who, oh boy, I gave the Allie Elliott Award for most likely to be the pre-merge robbed goddess. Yeah, obviously 0 points for me on this one. Every season, guys, every season there's a young woman who's a huge fan, fun personality, good player, and just ends up on the wrong side of a swap or the pointy end of some overthinking allies. It happened to Wentworth her first time around, and since then we've had Michaela, Allie, Rourke, Stephanie, Chelsea, the list goes on. Now, if Devious D-Rad had actually pulled off throwing a challenge to get her out, I would have had this one right on the money, and Devious D-Rad might have had some more money too. But I'm happy to be wrong here. Erika played a great game, the exact game she told us she'd play in the beginning. Come in like a lamb and leave like a lion. Erika seriously turned the heat on in the fourth quarter. She had a ride or die in Heather, was a key player in the biggest blindsides of the season, cleverly kept stray votes away from her, won immunity, nearly swept the jury, and traveled through time. Tough to imagine getting more out of your Survivor experience. Speaking of final vote tallies, let's get to the really important thing. How good were my preseason reads? I've tallied up all the points and I have 7 out of 18. Not the half the cast I was hoping for, but I'm happy with a full tribe and change. Here's to getting 8 points in Survivor 42. Got nothing else for you. I'll be taking Christmas and New Year's weekends off, but I'll be back before you know it. Hope you all have a safe and happy holiday season. Until next year, don't get idled out.